Amanda, Dr. Amanda, why should people listen to this episode of Pod Friends featuring you?
Well, Matt, people should listen to this episode of Pod Friends because they will learn about brain science. They will learn how to mentally prepare to be on Survivor. And because we talk about pasta.
Also, I think another reason people should listen is because looking at the Pod Friends logo, like that's clearly me sitting on the couch, but that could definitely be
Oh
you
my
on the other
gosh.
side of the
Wow.
couch,
This
right?
is this is what the whole show has been building to. That's what the graphic is. It was supposed to be Matt and Amanda sitting on a yellow couch. We're both wearing yellow shirts.
Yes.
That's what it is. It's always been meant to be. This is like what the whole Pod Friends franchise has been building to.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pod Friends. I'm your host, Matt Scott. That song was Pod Friends by the one and only Will from America. Shout out to Will. Will getting a lot of shout outs this season on Pod Friends, not only, of course, in the intros, as always, but in the conversation last week with Mary Kwiatkowski. And if you want to dive right into the conversation this week with Dr. Amanda Rabinowitz, all you need to do is skip ahead about 5 minutes. Just try it. You might hear me announcing and welcoming Dr. Amanda. You might hear the start of our conversation, but skip ahead about 5 minutes if you want to pass my intro. Thank you, Pod Friends, for tuning into my intro. And today it's going to be a relatively quick one. I just want to say, first and foremost, how thankful I am for you, the Pod Friends, all along this journey. I loved hearing from you with the Brice Isaiah podcast, The Baby Boy, with the season premiere. I loved hearing from you with the episode about the one and only Frail Mary, aka Mary Kwiatkowski. I am so excited to hear from you with this episode with Dr. Amanda Rabinowitz and with upcoming episodes with Owen Knight. I'm happy to announce that there's another one coming up with Franny Marin from Survivor 44. So you're getting some of that Survivor representation here. Maybe not the last of this season, of this Survivor off season, but this season of Pod Friends. And, I love to hear from all of you. I know I always plug social media, following me at Matt Scott GW, connecting there. I love to follow back, but also following at Hey Pod Friends on Twitter, aka X. I love to hear from you. And one other way I'd love to hear from folks is if you leave a voicemail, which you could do by going to speakpipe.com/podfriends. That's speakpipe.com/podfriends, because it's just awesome to hear from you. And I always tear up and really feel it. But also, if I get enough voicemails, would love to share them as part of the podcast sometime this season or otherwise. But I'm so excited for you to hear this episode because we recorded it a few months back, actually at the end of September, right as the Survivor season was getting started. And this was such an amazing conversation, such a special one, listening back to talking with Dr. Amanda. And Dr. Amanda, for those who don't know, is so many things, and we'll get into so many things about Dr. Amanda and her background at all, but it's someone who I really got to know because of this community. Because at first, when I podcasted about things like Black Voices of RHAP, featuring people on this network, Black people on this network, and our perspectives on representation, especially before the diversity initiative kicked in, as I podcasted about things like The Pride Has Spoken, and even as Pod Friends picked up, which is way after we already got to know each other, Dr. Amanda was someone who was so supportive and would always reach out and share her voice and really help me understand why it matters to have podcasts that are representing different communities and identities. Like one of the things that we do talk about toward the end of the conversation is just the evolution of the community when there used to be a perception about who is in a survivor podcasting community or who's in this type of community. And I'm so proud in the last few years since the class of 2020 with RHAP and otherwise how we've managed to diversify the voices and conversations, whether it's conversations here on Pod Friends, whether it's conversations like Black Voices of RHAP and The Pride Is Spoken, whether it's just normal recapping conversations that bring in so much nuance because of all of the amazing podcasters and diverse voices that are in them. And so I'm just so thankful, but I'm excited for you to hear this conversation with Amanda. We talk about brains. We talk about Survivor. We talk about Survivor quits. We reference Monica Lewinsky, which is interesting very early on. Of course, we talk about community and we go so many places, but I think you'll hear the love. And I hope that by the end of this conversation, you are one of the many people who, whether or not you're listening to Dr. Amanda, otherwise, whether or not you hear her each and every week on the Post Show Recaps Network, or you hear her this week on RHAP, Rob and Akiva Need a Podcast, where she's interviewing Rob and Akiva, that I hope you know and love Dr. Amanda as much as I do. So without further ado, let me get to introducing Dr. Amanda Rabinowitz. Making her way to the podcast, hailing from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, by way of Central Jersey, she is a behavioral neuroscientist, brain injury rehab researcher, a psychologist, a wife and mom, a wonderful cook and baker, someone who will beat you in an eating contest, and if she were a pro wrestler, her name would be Strigonona. Please welcome Dr. Amanda Rabinowitz. If we could be having this conversation, Amanda, anywhere, like paint the picture, get your paintbrush out, your canvas, your easel. Like, where would we be? Where would you like to be right now?
Well, I immediately had a reaction to this when you started to say it. I had like an initial answer, but I feel like I could do better, but I'm just gonna go with it.
No, go with your gut.
Well, do you remember when you met me at that hotel bar in Pentagon City?
Yes.
So this is the hotel bar of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. And this is the bar where Linda Tripp and Monica Lewinsky met for the first time, where she showed her the infamous dress that would eventually lead to the Bill Clinton impeachment inquiries. We were at that storied place, Matt. You and I met for a drink. I think I had a Negroni.
You definitely. You're a Negroni gal.
I think I ordered a Negroni. I think you also ordered a cocktail.
Maybe I got a Negroni though, because I feel like I'm also big on like I'll have what she's having.
Yes. Do you think that that's what Linda Tripp said to Monica Lewinsky?
I hope so.
I just felt like that was so fancy. Like you had come from work, I had been like at a meeting. We were both like dressed very professionally in this like place with like movers and shakers, and I feel like I liked that energy for us, like just like two professional people having a cocktail at this fancy bar.
I love that. And you know what, Amanda, you first of all, who's the Monica Lewinsky in the situation?
Oh no,
I'm assuming it's me.
Oh no!
But
who's the Bill Clinton in this scenario?
Let's can't talk about that. I'll be the Monica though. Like, come on. But you know what? You just inspired me to do a first in Pod Friends. I'm changing this is obviously primarily an audio medium, but for people who are watching the video, I'm changing the background to a freaking hotel bar.
Oh my
This
goodness, I feel
yes.
it now.
Chandelier, fancy ceilings with decorations that are out of, uh, I was gonna
Wow.
say Leonardo DiCaprio, but I might be
Yeah.
going for
Leonardo
Da
da
Vinci.
Vinci,
Yes,
DiCaprio, the Ninja
yes.
Turtle, all the Leonardos.
Michelangelo,
Yes.
yes, Donatello, and, we love this. Yes, this feels very authentic for us, at
Mhm.
10:30 in the morning, but, there we go. I like that, though. No, I appreciate this, and, I have to say beautiful way of starting out this podcast.
Mm.
But more than anything, I'm a little panicked right now because I refer to you as Dr. Amanda and I feel and which is accurate as one does.
Mhm. Yes.
But I mean, I feel like there need to be disclaimers. Do you have any disclaimers to offer or anything like that?
I am not a real no, no, okay, I am a real doctor. I am real well, this is no, this
Wow.
is a great place to start.
Dr. Amanda is not a real doctor. Wow.
I I have a
Expose.
PhD
Mhm.
in psychology in
That
the
sounds real
area of
to me.
clinical psychology, and my specialty is clinical neuropsychology. So,
Mhm.
I am a doctor. When a lot of people hear doctor, they think physician, they think medical doctor.
Sure.
I am not a medical doctor. So, for example, if somebody is playing Survivor Philly and has a injury, I cannot actually provide medical treatment to them.
Well, okay, let me correct you on something or push back on something here.
Mhm.
You can, just not in your capacity as a doctor.
I can provide I can provide care. I don't know if I would call it medical care. I can't bill I can't bill for that time. I would not
No.
treat that as medical advice. So yeah. So I am a doctor, but I'm a psychologist. I'm not
Mhm.
a medical doctor or a physician. I do work in like health and medical research. I do brain injury research, but specifically brain injury rehabilitation research.
Yeah.
So, I've had people ask if I was a neurosurgeon before. I've had people think that I was lots of different things. I'm a psychologist. That is my background. And I love that I have been affectionately titled Dr. Amanda in this
Mhm.
community. Um, I can tell the origin of that nickname, even though that's,
Uh, I mean, well, yes, but also I would imagine that your PhD was your
well,
origin.
that yeah, that's the origin of the credential, but I would not have, like, willingly put myself out there and said, like, "Hey,
Yes.
everybody call me Dr. Amanda," in this podcast community.
Mhm.
Akiva was the first person who started calling me Dr. Amanda because Akiva
Oh.
really respects professional titles. And so he did that, and I thought it was really sweet. And it was pretty like early after I'd gotten my PhD, and especially in my early professional career, like people would not refer to me as a doctor because I was younger once, and also being a woman, and also being a
Mm.
psychologist who was often in a medical setting. There were like a lot of reasons that people wouldn't refer to me by my professional title. And I
Yes.
would be introduced a lot of times like, oh, look, Dr. Smith and Amanda are here.
Oh.
And so it really did endear me very much when Akiva would call me Dr. Amanda
Mhm.
on the podcast. And then people just started calling me that affectionately. And then when I got more involved in the podcast world, I sort of wanted to keep my last name separate from
Yeah.
everything that I do in my like fun, silly nonsense world because not
Mhm.
because I'm like ashamed of it as much as when people
Sure. That's actually why you're here because I do feel like you're pretty ashamed of me, but and everyone
as
else,
I'm
but
ashamed of you, Matt, I would never be ashamed of you.
but yeah, no.
Well,
I
I just don't
understand what you're
my
saying.
concern is that, like, if I'm Googled, I don't want, like, the first 3
Yeah,
like, results to be something that has to do with a podcast when I'm trying to be out there professionally in this different capacity, so that's
yeah.
really all that's about, and so I kind of embrace the Dr. Amanda, but I do feel, like, kind of silly and self-conscious about it sometimes because I don't wanna be like this
Wow.
obnoxious person who's like, "Actually, I'm a doctor." And there's a lot of people who have advanced degrees, and everybody should
Yeah.
get respect and recognition for that.
I love that, and it's also well, I mean, the part that I appreciated about this, because I understand the not wanting to awkwardly cross worlds, because it's not even like, people from that, that side of your life could dive into the podcast. And if
Mhm.
anything, it's just like, what is going on here? Like, what are these conversations? But it's also like, you represent yourself and your profession and everyone else incredibly well, as we know.
Thank
But
you.
I think you're welcome. You didn't need to hear that from me, I'm sure. But I will, I will also say, like, I think the thing that's fascinating is like that it is such an a unique identity in a lot of ways within this community. But I also hear you. Like, my mom is a PhD, and it's funny because I don't even call her mom at this point. I'm just like, doctor. I'll always lead with that, lead with the respect, because
Mhm.
well, two things. One is that she, like, while we're the Scott family, she kept her maiden name,
Mhm.
her last
Yeah.
name. And I think that that was also like really inspirational, and like seeing that, like, even in her relationship with my dad and just like all of that. See, oh my God, Amanda, you're getting into my brain. I feel like this is turning into a therapy session. But
Mhm. I
like,
knew it.
she oh my gosh, this is free therapy. There we go. But no, I think that it's amazing because, yeah, there's a lot of times where people, like, unintentionally will discredit you, or unintentionally
Mhm.
will discredit women, I should say, in particular, when they do have these degrees, or just assume because you're married to someone and family that, like, you have their last
Right.
name, because that's been a norm for so long. And so
Mhm.
I don't know, I love to see you out there shining, doing your thing, being
Yeah.
doctor, with the disclaimers needed that this is you're not in your professional capacity for this
On
podcast.
the well, yeah, I mean, we could go there. I mean, if you just
Oh,
wanna
we
talk
will.
if you just wanna talk about brain science, we could go there. Yeah, I mean, it is like, I do feel like it's a little, like, stuffy to use credentials, but then I think you're right, Matt. Like, I think about it, like, as a woman and representing women in the sciences, like, it should be the same kind of automatic process that people get their professional titles. And being a woman in the science for now, as long as I have, it is not. And people do it in like subtle ways all the time, unintentionally. And like, so I joke about it. Like, I was at a watch party last night for the Survivor 45 premiere, and people come up and call me
Mm,
Dr. Amanda. And I like just, I made a joke about it, and I said, I just get referred to as a doctor so much more in the RHAP universe than I do in my professional capacity. But so it is a very nice thing.
yeah. And just as a side note, again, mostly for the video viewers,
Mhm.
but I'm gonna put back the Pod Friends
Oh,
background, so
okay.
we're
Yeah,
not
yeah.
just in the bar as we talk about doctor stuff. But then again, that's a good
Mentally, I'm in the bar. Yeah.
yes, great place for a conversation, though, I have
Mhm.
to say. I love the scene that you set. But no, I mean, I it is actually a little bit fascinating to me on the doctor front, because I
Mhm.
won't go in the dark direction of asking you if you have been, like, on a plane when they've been like, "Is there a doctor here?" But, like,
Yeah.
do people get confused with that sometimes? Beyond, like, maybe a Survivor Philly context or something where someone might think that you're actually a medical doctor. Are there any, I don't know, fun or funny stories of people
Yeah.
mistaking you for, like, now I'm just trying to name types of doctors. I don't know what an
Yeah.
obstetrician is, or
An
a
obstetr
podiatrist, or
Podiatrist is foot,
but
obstetrician
yes.
is babies, the liver. Yeah, I
I'm
don't
like, that's
have
all I can think
you're
of.
like, those are and that's really all you need in the
The
doctor
only two
department.
doctors I need, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have I mean, like, I've definitely had people think that I was a brain surgeon before, but not,
Mm,
like, in any sort of professional capacity, because they know that I, study something about brains. I have a funny story from one of my colleagues, like, where she was at a baseball game,
mm.
and she's also a neuropsychologist like me, and, like, somebody in the stands fainted and asked if there was a doctor, and her, like, 4-year-old son was like, "My mommy is a doctor." And then she was like, "Shh, no, I'm not that kind of doctor."
Oh my
So,
gosh.
yeah, but I don't have that many funny professional, like,
That's
misdoctorings. I think people know that there's different kinds of doctors now.
misdoctorings.
You could call me a
Should we
doctress. A doc
oh, oh, no.
No.
I was
No,
like,
don't
I
do that.
don't
Don't do
yeah, I was
that.
gonna say, I don't feel great about
No, it's not
doctoress as a
great. It's
title,
not
but,
great. No.
uh this is ridiculous. But you know what? Like, there's so much to talk about with you beyond the
Mm.
doctoring things. But I mean, since we're on it, I kind of want to ask you a very broad, general
Mhm.
question as it relates to brains. We'll get into other stuff. I'm sure we'll talk
Yeah.
about Philly things. We'll talk about some food. We'll talk
Yeah.
about some
Ooh.
strikes and not
Yeah, yeah,
strikes
yeah.
and community and all the things. But, like, how do you feel that your brain maybe I'll go with this. How do you feel brain stuff
Uh-huh.
relates with like this world of reality TV fandom? I don't know. I'm curious if there's anything in particular, any elements of like the work that you do that
Mhm.
relate to this because like that's what brings like all of
Yeah.
us as listeners, as pod friends together, right?
I mean, of course it does. Like, I do feel like my interest in psychology and interest in how, the human brain works and how people interact socially and all of that has been like so central to my attraction to Survivor from the very beginning and
Mm,
part of what pulled me into this community. Absolutely. I mean, I'm a psychologist, and while I kind of specialize in brain behavior relationships, I mean, that's really everything. Everything that we experience is, our perceptions filtered through our experiences in interaction with our environment, and it's all mediated through the way that our brain is processing things. And, my interest in kind of seeing the world that way was like really integral to becoming interested in Survivor more so than like reality TV broadly. I'm like definitely a Survivor
mhm.
fan who like gets all of the rest of the community through osmosis, but like Survivor
Yeah.
is really what I'm interested in. Um and I just, thought it was fascinating to see how different people would react to this kind of social experiment. And I this might be like a bit of a tangent, but like one of the aspects of behavioral neuroscience that, I think a lot of people who are interested from a psychological standpoint are most focused on is this kind of self-regulation process that we have. And when you understand that on a neurobiological level, like we're thinking about how we have these frontal lobes that
Mhm.
are good at regulating and control what Freud would have called the superego. And then we
Mm,
have the reactive limbic part of our brain, which is the one that will respond with the part of our brain that is much more evolutionarily speaking older, like the lizard brain that's just going to react in fight or
mm,
flight capacity. And so much of our kind of interesting behaviors have to do with those two parts of the brain talking to each other, right? It's like there's your emotional brain saying, I'm scared, this is bad, or I want this. And then there's the frontal lobes that are sort of regulating that and saying, okay, well, you want that right now, but actually you have
yeah.
to sit still and wait. And, or, you're afraid of this, but you can still do it. You can push yourself. So like those parts of the brain kind of talking in concert is really kind of this like central mechanism from where our personality arises. So that's all a lot of like jargony background to say
Yeah.
you put people in a situation and you watch those intrapsychic units fighting with each other, and like that's kind of how I see reality TV. I see people in that tension between their lizard brains and their
Mm,
frontal lobes, and like how can they regulate that circuit in order to make connections, make good decisions, be strategic, do all of that stuff. So that's what I love about Survivor. That's what I love about, it's like it really is one of these experiments where we're all observers and we get to see people in this situation.
I think that this is all really fascinating because the sometimes we're so quick to judge with what we see on these shows and how people approach things. And, this will come out when it comes out. But something that I think, even in Big Brother, in that community, that has been a conversation, as well as in Survivor over the years, a ton, is just like the idea of quitting and people,
Mm.
deciding not to be in that situation. I always find myself, actually, I should say increasingly, I find myself being very not only sympathetic to that, but just like pointing out that I think that at times the ways that we as fans perceive what's happening on the
Mhm.
shows are largely guided by the producers, are largely guided by the hosts and their decisions. So I think of like Jeff, for instance, on Survivor, and I think about just some of his reactions. There are some great videos on YouTube that are like
Mhm.
Jeff and all of the Survivor quits that have happened to date. And it's like, you'll see his reaction at first. I think Austin was the very
Yeah.
first one. Don't ask me to
Yeah.
name what season it was, but like
Pearl
very
Islands,
early.
right?
Okay, yes, you're probably right. I'm like, sure, yes, I think so. I'm not great. I don't have my brain is not set up for the recall of seasons in the moment. But yeah, like I think of that, and Jeff responded very negatively, and we just saw with 44 another situation where Jeff was a lot more mild. I think in more recent years he's been more mild with his
Mhm.
response, which I appreciate because I think there's often like a pile on too
Yeah.
based on the
Yeah.
host reaction. I think of The Challenge. TJ Lavin
Mhm.
hates quitters, and that show has a
I've heard
culture of
that, yes.
hating quitters, which I'm like, this is a TV show. If I have to quit, I'm quitting. I would
Yeah.
love to be on one of these shows and quit, just to be like, come at me, come at me. What, do you want to question why I
Yeah.
quit? I'll talk about it if my NDA allows. But no, like it's one thing I'm curious about from you is, are there like certain, well, I'm curious if your understanding of official term brain stuff
Yes.
relates at all to like certain seasons you resonate with or certain characters you resonate with. And I ask that because Survivor is a very edited show, and
Mhm.
so at times we don't get like that insight into the characters, that insight into their decision making. Some edits that we've received over time, I'll say, are quote unquote like more truthful
Yeah.
than others, or more based in like, this is how someone functions from a psychological perspective. So I
Mhm.
am curious if there are any seasons or characters that jump out to you that really connect with your interest in, you know,
Yeah.
behavioral neuroscience.
Um, oh, it's such a good question. I mean, I love the seasons where there are players that we just get an edit that highlights that emotional like insight and that,
Mm,
and that context. Like I think of, I think of Gabby Pascuzzi and Christian Hubicki and David Wright, who had like edits that like really focused on, what they were experiencing. And I also love like with, Christian's edit, and there've been a handful of these where it's like somebody gets out there and we see their struggle, but we also sort of see them like develop their superpower, and I think in Cerie's first season, we definitely got that edit from her. It's like we see her struggling, but then we also see her learning something about herself and discovering strengths. And I think that that's, really great. So I love when the show brings those experiences to light, because even though it is edited and, it's obviously
mhm,
packaged for TV and like made a story, like I think if you're watching something and you relate to it, it's like that is a truthful like human moment, even if it's just a piece of it, right? And it's like we'll never see a full story that is like doing a absolute service to every member of the
mhm,
cast. I mean, obviously we've never seen that. So I think that's the biggest way that the edit manipulates and kind of how it highlights and then backgrounds different characters. But those are the aspects of the show that have always appealed to me. And like getting back to the quit question, like I mean,
Uh-oh.
I think it's those and we're like we're recording this, we're recording this at a time where like this is a conversation that I'm seeing
Yes.
happening on Twitter. And it's such a fascinating question, and I love that you're asking this, like, from a human psychology point of view, because the reason that people love this show is because it puts you in a situation where it, like, strains you in all of these ways, right? You're strained
Mm.
mentally while you're trying to figure out, like, what's the most optimal thing to do. You're strained emotionally, like, you don't have people out there that you know and you can trust, and everything's in the context of a game, and you're super strained physically, like you're not eating, you're probably not sleeping, you're doing extremely physically demanding things. And, back to like mentioning, brains for a minute, it's like this your cognitive ability to do all of that emotion regulation, to do all of that thinking that you need to do, that's a limited capacity system. And
Mm.
it relies on fuel. Like consumes about 20% of the oxygen that you
Oh my gosh.
consume. Like when you're thinking hard, it can go up to 50% of the oxygen that your body needs goes to your brain. So if you're like running hard or if you're like not eating well, you're taxing that system. That system doesn't have everything that it needs. So we're sick weirdos, so we like watching people in this situation, but we watch the show because like those moments kind of like strip people to the point where we see this humanity, and like I think that that's what's really compelling. But what that means is that we're like pushing people really really hard, and I do not like to watch people suffer in a way that they
Mhm.
cannot easily recover from because they went on a TV show. I do not enjoy it. I don't enjoy watching people get brain injuries on television. I don't
No.
enjoy watching people like hurt themselves, get like infections that they're not going to recover from. Like I want to watch a show with the comfort and trust that the producers are not going to let anybody get seriously hurt.
Yeah, that's pretty
And
important.
if you and that even means, like, psychologically and emotionally, and if somebody is, like, stripped of everything and doesn't have food and doesn't have shelter and isn't sleeping and maybe has something else going on, and it's, like, tapping them of all of that energy that they need to play the game, and they know in their heart that they have to remove themselves from that
Mhm.
situation, it's like, yeah, that sucks. That's not what any of us want to like, that's not
No.
the ideal outcome. That's not what that person, when they applied, was, like, imagining as their journey. But if they got to that point, because that's the conceit of the show is that it pushes people to that point, some people are gonna quit, right? We don't want it to happen all the
Mhm.
time. We don't want it to happen because people are frivolous with the opportunity, but it's going
Yeah.
to happen sometimes. Like, and I just don't see the point in being overly vitriolic about that as
Yeah.
like it's like either we make the show a lot easier, which people will complain about, or sometimes people are going to call that. I don't know if it's a quit or whatever. Sometimes people are going to say this is not the best thing for me.
Yeah, and that's really powerful to see, though, when people do say, "This is not the best thing for me. The TV overlords don't control my life. Like, the producers don't control
Mhm.
me. I'm gonna put me first," which I think I'm increasingly appreciating seeing it because there's no way from, like, the viewer perspective that you could really fully understand what
Yeah.
someone's going through, just all of the dynamics, and then the other thing is like, "Oh, that could have been someone else's spot." Well, you know, that person will probably show up the next season. It probably wasn't gonna be like, you know,
Right.
random person on, Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it who
Yeah.
would have been in that spot. And so there's a lot there. But I guess one thing I wanna ask just more on the well, actually, I'll tie this to something else because I don't remember Amanda, this is
Yes.
where my research team has failed me
Oh.
today. Did you I'm vaguely remembering. Did you do a podcast on brains? within RHAP. Have you done one of those
I've done a
before?
couple of, like,
Okay.
psychology I did one with Rob, like, back in 2017, like, a
I
long time
vaguely
ago,
remember that,
and then
yeah.
I did one, with the great Shannon Guss, on
Mhm.
her like, game theory series about
Mhm.
social strategy techniques that were related to psychology.
Okay, I'm glad. Like, knew that was I remember this vaguely, but also at the same time, see, my research team, they're on strike right now.
Oh, yeah,
But
well, we
yeah,
support
the
workers,
writers,
yes.
I know, and I'm so happy for them too.
Mhm.
It's shout out to
Love
them.
that for
Uh,
them.
love that for them. But I ask that because I'm curious if there are, like, as we begin to pivot to other things too, like, are there certain tangible lessons, imagining that there are thousands of potential future survivors, thousands of potential future survivor
Mhm.
applicants listening. Like, are
Yeah,
there lessons that you have from them from that brain perspective to be as ready as possible or to navigate that situation?
yeah.
Or just any other lessons that you have as a, I know you're a survivor expert in the
Almost
Philly area. Let's not joke. You're iconic.
Uh-huh. Oh, well, I mean, like, I don't know how good my advice is for people, like, going to play a game that I've never played before, but, like, I
Right.
will say, like, in general, just from, like, a capacity standpoint, like, if you're people talk about preparing for the show physically and preparing for the show in like all of these, by studying puzzles or being like all caught up on strategy and things like that. I think that probably like an underrated aspect of preparation is just you know developing your own coping capacity and
Mhm.
like understanding just how much your coping systems are going to be strained or unavailable to you like when you go on the island, and I think it's that like emotional preparation that probably makes a difference for a lot of players. And I think there's probably like 2 points in the game where it would be really challenging, and it's probably right at the beginning when you're like
Mhm.
first thrown into it and you haven't yet adapted, and like you're sort of overwhelmed with all of the changes and all of the demands. And then I imagine also as the game wears on that those are also, going to be challenging parts. So I think that like in terms of like novel advice that I could offer, I feel like doing a really good self-assessment of what your strengths and weaknesses are in terms of how you cope with challenges. Like some people might know, like, I'm just gonna have so much adrenaline that in the first few days I'm gonna be great. Whereas, other people might say, like, I don't do well with change. And like just thinking about being mindful of, okay, this is something that's going to challenge me, and thinking
Mhm.
about other things that you can do to recharge. Because like I think that metaphor of we just have this like limited capacity system, like if you think about your computer and you're running lots of programs, like at
Yeah.
some point it's going to slow down.
All the
So
tabs, yeah.
all the too many tabs, and I am like I have multiple windows with like upwards of like 25 tabs open right now,
Oh
but
my
that is
gosh.
I know it's not good, but just think about you have I think you have to think about your brain that way. Like how many tabs do you have open, and like when
Wow.
you put yourself in a new situation, like being aware of that and figure what can I shut down? Like how can I recharge? How can I give myself a little bit more when I know that I need it? And maybe that's, social connection, maybe that's alone time, maybe that's going for a walk. But having those strategies in place so that you're not trying to figure that out on the fly, I think that could help people who go into the game.
Wow. I love this. I love this. I love that you're like getting into it, sharing all of it. I love that you mentioned we brought up the tabs,
Mhm.
and just to hit like a backspace, backspace, backspace,
Oh, okay.
backspace, backspace, backspace on this conversation, Amanda. Like, I want to go back to baby Dr. Amanda. You know
Oh
what I'm
my
saying?
goodness.
Like,
Yeah, when I was just a little baby doctor.
yeah. But uh, yeah, yes, probably before the PhD and all. But
Okay.
like, I mean, I think that one thing that Pod Friends is all about is just like who are people, like where are they
Mhm.
coming from, like where are your roots, all that. So I'm
Mhm.
curious, like, just what's your this is a big question, but like what
Wow.
was your life? Like where did you grow up?
What
Like
was my life? What was that?
It's like, sorry. Like, I know it's over, your best days are behind you,
They
but
really are. No, no lie.
no,
Yeah,
yes,
what
like where did you grow, like, because it's always interesting to me, and I don't even know if we've had this like full on conversation because I always love to put the pieces together of like how people
yeah.
become who they are and like how they are, but like just spilled the tea as I sip my tea.
Sure. Well, Matt, like you, I am a child of New Jersey.
Yes.
I was born in New Jersey and raised in central New Jersey, in New Brunswick.
Sorry.
I no, it was fine. I was born
North
in
Jersey.
yeah, I feel like okay, I mean, I know that so Central New Jersey was only recently declared by Phil
It's
Murphy to be a
official.
real place. So now
And I
people
will
cannot
say
deny my existence anymore.
like, New Brunswick, if it had to be north or south, we're claiming,
It would
you're
be north.
south.
No, I
Yeah,
agree.
for north,
I
yeah.
agree. Like, I mean, the like South Jersey, it's like I am not that. I know that.
No,
No offense to South Jersey. I mean, like, kind of offense
we
to South
we're
Jersey, but
unified against it, yeah.
so if I had to be in one, I would have been North Jersey. But since
Mhm.
Central Jersey exists, New Brunswick is it's like New Brunswick is the most like central of central New Jersey.
Yeah,
I feel like New Brunswick and Princeton, it's like that. It's definitely Central Jersey.
yeah.
Anyway, that's where I grew up. I like was raised in one house. My mom only sold it like a couple of years ago, my childhood home.
Mhm,
Um and yeah, I mean, I was raised by both of my parents are were not practicing they both sort of identified as atheists, but I was raised
mhm.
Jewish and I went to Catholic school, so that was kind of an interesting thing
Oh my
about my
gosh.
upbringing.
Yeah, you're joining the collection of people, myself included, who are not Catholic, who went to Catholic school, and it's
Mm.
always so fascinating to talk to people about that. How was that, though, for you, going to Catholic school?
I mean, I wouldn't, like, recommend it. I didn't know any better, so, like, I liked I had my friends and I liked it, but I didn't have, like, a great Catholic school experience, and, like, some of it was because of, like, the typical things, like, very harsh disciplinarians, like, lots of, like, we got yelled at about really arbitrary dumb things like knee
Mm.
socks being slouched or like,
Yeah.
wearing ornate scrunchies or
Oh
things.
my gosh.
I think I got a little bit targeted in maybe an
Mm.
anti-Semitic way by
Oh my
teachers, like
gosh.
as like being even though I always like did pretty well in school, like I would get in trouble for like really dumb things and I like never got like when I tried out for the play, I didn't like I just like I didn't get any like any awards or anything that other people got.
Yeah.
So I it was and then there was like a little bit of like a little bit and there was also a lot of sexism in Catholic school. Like the teachers really they would like accuse when I was like in junior high, they would accuse girls of like being slutty if they like talked to
Mhm.
boys and like they would make us report to them like to make sure we weren't wearing makeup and like even like lick their fingers and wipe them
Oh
on
my
our
gosh.
faces and like it was really bad. They made us like empty out our purses in front of the whole class to see if anybody had makeup in their bags. It wasn't great. It
So
was
weird.
like it was bad.
Yeah.
I probably had, like, some okay teachers, but there was, like, a little bit of an anti-intellectualism there too, and I was, like, we had to write this report on AIDS for some reason in 8th grade with
Oh,
these, like,
no.
we were learning about AIDS. There's, like, definitely some weird agenda about it, and then,
Mhm.
we had to like address whether you could there was a cure for AIDS, and at the time it was like, there was not any, I mean,
Yeah.
like, there so but I knew that my teacher thought that prayer could cure AIDS. So I was like, my mom was helping me with the report, and I was like, she thinks that you can cure AIDS with prayer. And like, my mom is also a PhD and like was very like,
Mhm.
okay, well, let's see if we can say like there is not like to date, there is not that like, and I researched it, like I did a really good job. And then I ended up getting a D on that
Oh.
paper. And the teacher just, like, wrote "What about prayer?" in, like, all red, like, on the page, and look, that was a really bad experience. So,
Mhm.
Catholic school was, like, not great, but it was really interesting to, like, have that kind of, like, dual faith exposure, I
Mhm.
think, and I think it, like, made me very thoughtful about, like, spirituality and about, like, my what was important to me and my own, like, sense of like, I'm not a spiritual person, but it helped me,
Yeah.
like, discover, like, how do you understand that people have these different perspectives, and, I felt like that was good and rich, but then I was, like, really, really relieved to not be in the Catholic school system anymore when I went to high school. How was it for
Yeah.
you? Was it, like
Thanks for
w
asking.
Yeah,
Oh my
I would
gosh.
love to hear. Yeah.
Because it's fascinating because I do really feel like and I'm glad you asked because I was probably gonna insert this anyway to like
Mhm.
give Catholicism a little bit of a break because there are definitely different school
Oh, yeah.
experiences for sure, which is one thing that I think a lot of people understand within that. And I felt like it formed me in certain ways with like the just so much about as someone who is not a religious person and really was never truly a religious person, but grew up, my family being like I'd say more of a non-denominational Christian family.
Mhm.
um, but even then, like I remember learning about Jesus, and I was like, oh my gosh, like yes, like let's love. That was my takeaway from all of it. I was like, oh, we should love everybody and like let's do what we
Yeah.
can to make the world a better place. And I do think to myself sometimes like the ways that I show up in the world, I do think are largely informed by like the sense of service from
Mhm.
that. But then I also think about like so maybe like to give like I'll bounce back and forth between like positives and negatives, but one of like the negatives, I remember I won this, not to brag, Amanda, but I won this essay contest like at my school a few years in a row, which was like, and I'm mortified. I'm glad that this was like almost pre-internet.
Uh-huh.
It's not out there anymore, but it was like an essay contest for something called Respect Life, which was like
Uh-huh.
obviously
Like
pro
pro-life. Yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah.
And I was like, yes, like the babies deserve, and they would bring in like
Yeah.
little model, all the
Oh,
things.
yeah, we had
And it
that
was
kind of
just like
thing.
not a
Yeah.
type of thing that you need to have like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 year olds who don't understand any of that talk
Right.
about, which like uh I'm not mortified by those essays because I realized I remembered them a few years back and I was like, wow, like the gall of like actually asking for us to share some of that. But then I also think about a lot of my experience, which was like really intellectual or not the stereotype of Catholic schools, where I'm
Mhm.
just thankful that for the most part, I was surrounded by people who were like very reasonable,
Mhm.
rooted in information and science and
Yeah,
facts, but
yeah.
and also not really like tying religion into everything, which I think
Mm.
was cool. But
Yeah.
there are moments, but yeah, it was like a relatively good experience. But at the same time, I see how, like, even if my brain was different, I see how I could have received things differently. And I also think, like, at times, especially in high school, like, where because I went to Catholic school K to 12, like,
Mhm.
being in just being like different, like being like a black queer
Yeah.
person, like that to me, I think protected me often from just like receiving things. And often I just had to process and think for myself, like, how does this thing that they're sharing relate to me? Um, and so I think I, you know, turned out pretty well
Oh,
without too much trauma from
you
it,
turned out
but
great, great. But
wow.
that's a good point. Like, I do feel like because I was like, my sister and I were the only Jewish people at our
Yeah.
school.
Yeah, wait, this is, like, a good connection, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So like I do feel like that, like, and like you said, I think in some ways like that identity thing like inoculates you from some of like the stuff where like the religious indoctrination like doesn't totally
Mhm,
get in your head. But I also feel like it was like super, super valuable for me to like understand, like, because I was K through 8,
mhm.
like what it felt like to be different in like
Yeah,
a way, and and there's like lots of ways that I will never understand how it feels different, but I do feel like that
mm,
was like a really valuable thing to learn. And like you know like was like sometimes I felt good about being different and sometimes I felt bad about being like I remember like, like
yeah,
asking my mom if I could like have a confirmation or if I could do these things, and like whenever they went to get communion, like sitting and like not getting communion. And they
yeah,
also like, yeah,
exactly.
my school was really bad though. Like I feel like it was
It
a
sounds
really
like it.
it's yeah, it was really bad. I feel like and I don't want to paint like all parochial
No,
schools with that brush,
of course not.
but they did
But
a
I
lot to, like, single out the non-Catholics, and,
I
like, and then me
yeah.
being, like, Jewish and not, like, non-Christian non-Catholic, they, like, really made a point to single me out as being different.
Yeah, but I also think as you know, and that's your story and that's your
Yeah.
experience. So, that's exactly what we're here to talk about.
Mhm.
But at the same time, you reference something that I think is really powerful. Like even the experience of sitting as others went up and got communion
Mhm.
and like witnessing. I think for me personally, that made me one a more observant person, not in the not in the religious sense, not
Mhm.
observe, but like observant in terms of like, huh, this is like just watching and like seeing how people work and how people think and just the interactions. And it made me, I think, more of a curious person in some
Mhm.
ways.
Yeah.
But then also, like, there's definitely and I'm sure I've had this conversation with different people on Pod Friends, but I think for me, especially growing up in the community I did in New Jersey, in North
Mhm.
Jersey, where it was so diverse, where we
We
had
were
like I remember
communicating from, like, the North Jersey,
we
Central Jersey
were we
divide,
were
like, we
we
were like
were
on
the uh-huh. I mean, but, like, we had, like, a ton of, like so much diversity within my town,
Yeah.
West Orange, like,
Yeah.
including, like, tons of Jewish people and, like, my
Mhm.
on my soccer team, like, you'd have people from, I'd say all sorts of parts of town. There's a
Yeah.
great comedian, and podcaster, Chris Gethard,
Oh,
who is from
yeah.
West Orange, who talks
Yeah.
about, like, okay, they're the up the hill kids, the down the hill kids, and you have, like, just the mix of different people, but, like, I think that, like, the silver lining, I would say, from me from like that upbringing is really maybe having like more of an understanding or empathy for people who are like the ones who have to like sit out as other people are doing things, or the people who are on the
Yeah.
margins, or the people who
Yes.
aren't
Yes.
like seen in the way that they should be. And so, there's a lot there, but I'm
Yes.
like, maybe to kind of tie that to, we really spent some time in Catholic school right
Mhm.
there, which I think is interesting. But like, how do you feel like that upbringing growing up? Of course, you also went to high school and all the things, but like,
Mhm.
how did that do you feel like that paved the way for just where you would go in life after? And I'm kind of curious, like, what was the where did you go?
Where
Where'd you
did I
go in life?
go? Where'd I
Yes.
go?
Where is Amanda? Do you know where it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your
Where
Amanda is?
um, well, let's see. I mean, so, like, chronologically, then I went to, like, I went to a private non-parochial high school and, like, had a really good experience there because I felt like I was, like, really academically challenged. I, like, fit in a little bit better. Like, I didn't feel like the teachers hated me and I was always in trouble, which was actually, like,
That
terrible
helps.
for me because, like, I'm such a
Wow.
people pleaser. It's funny now that I have kids, like, I see in my kids, like, some of the qualities that I have, and, like,
Um,
one of my, like, sons is, like, super, like, he just wants all the adults to, like, be saying he's doing a good job, and that's exactly
yeah.
what I was like. So to, like, have teachers, like, not like me when I was like, "I'm trying to be so good," like, that was really devastating to me. But then I, like, got positive attention and everything in high school, and
Mhm.
it was like and that was all really good. Yeah, and it's like it's interesting because, like you said, we talked a lot about Catholic school, and it's like funny, like now I'm 42 years old, so I feel like
Mhm.
there was like I as I was telling my Catholic school story, I feel like that used to be like such an important part of like understanding like my journey and where I've become. But like now that I've like lived so much more life, I was like, oh, I still have this story, but it feels like so much more in the background in terms of
Mhm.
who I am now, even though like obviously it shaped me. But like,
Sure.
it's like it's interesting those like pieces. Like I do feel like one of the things that I carried from Catholic school and kind of ties in to the survivor community is like
Oh.
I think I had this, like, kind of, like, tentative outsider, like, approach socially, like, I was, like, like, in places, but didn't feel like I should jump right in or be in the
Mhm.
middle, and it was, like, interesting, like, that kind of later in my adulthood, like, finding the survivor community when I first discovered, like, RHAP, I was, like, a listener, and I was, like, you know, following along with everything, and I remember when the patron program started, like, I was kind of like this like, it took me, like, maybe a year before I became a patron because I was like, "Okay, well, like, I'm kind of on the outside, that's not for me," and then I became a patron, and I, like, felt like I would, like, go to an event, but, like, I didn't feel like I was, like, part of it. Like, I don't know, I felt, like, very tentative about, like, jumping in and, like,
Yeah.
being like, thinking about, like, podcasting or, like, even, like, calling like, I felt like, like, that's not for me, like, I sort of stay on the sidelines, and then, like, it was
Yeah.
through I think, like, just being in the community, and I remember, like, being I'm about, like, at least 10 years older than, like, the, like, Allie Lashers and Shannon Gusses, and, like, when they started appearing on the network, I was just like, "These, like, young women are my hero." Like, I was like,
Mhm.
"I would never
Wow.
do what they're doing." Like, I remember, like, I think Allie was still in college or maybe law school, and, like, I started hearing these, like, voices and these, like, women's voices on the network, and I was like, "Wow, like, how are these, like, young women, like, so self-possessed that they're like, I have something to say about this, and I'm just gonna
Yeah.
go on a podcast and do it," and I think I've, like, told both of them, but, like, it blew me away, and, like, eventually, I think I just got, like, sick of being, like, so self-conscious about this stuff, and, like, Alex G invited me to be on Survivor Philly. This was, like, a big
Mhm.
part of my journey of embracing the community, like and, like, in the meantime, I was doing other, like, self-confidence building things, like getting a PhD and, like, becoming, like, like, I was doing these things that feel and eventually but I feel like it took me a long time to feel like, "Oh, like, you are valid in a community, and you can just, like, call into this patron show or, like, be it like, you can
Yeah.
or introduce yourself to this person or go to this party and, like, talk to this person," and I know it probably sounds, like, dumb, but, like, I feel like it
No.
took me until I was, like, 30 years old, like, to start to be like, "Oh, you can actually take space in this way," and I do think that that, like, does connect a little bit to, like, my upbringing experience.
I love this. And I love it because I relate so much to what you're saying. Like it's fascinating to hear what you're talking about because I do think being in this community, like as a podcaster who joined in 2020, so it's been
Mhm.
3 years now, like I mean, I was listening for years before that, and I remember the first time where I was like, "Ooh, I should podcast and be in this conversation." Like, other than just, like, listening and, having moments where I'm, like, thinking to myself or probably talking to myself, like, "Oh my gosh," like, Josh Wigler said XYZ thing, or Amanda said, like, XYZ thing on the network. Like, what would I say in this
Yeah.
conversation? Like, it was really, Island of the Idols was, like, the season where
Mhm.
I just with everything that was
Yes.
happening there that is just was horrible, where I was like, "Oh my gosh, like, I have a perspective to bring," like, as like, especially as someone at the time who was still super engaged in, like, sexual assault awareness and sexual
Mhm.
violence work, like, and all that. That was, like, when I first had that instinct, and then it was about 8 months later that, everything happened with George Floyd and the class of 2020
Yes.
came around. But I will say, something that I still, navigate is like just that. I don't know if it's like imposter syndrome or what I would call that
Yeah.
personally, but I think it's challenging like in any community you're in to like constantly to fully understand like especially with podcasting, like to understand the full impact of your voice or your space within
Mhm.
that, because you just don't hear from people all the time. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Grace Leader and I, shout out to Grace, talk so much
Love
about like
Grace.
reach out to us, because we do like the Pride Has Spoken with Evie,
Mhm.
we do Heartstopper, and at some of these live events, including like one of them from the spring in Toronto, I had so many people. Like I will always remember one person who like came up to me, running up to me and like being like, "Oh my god, you're podcasting." This is someone who was like, you know, and there have been multiple people like this, but like coming out on their journey and getting comfortable with
Yes.
themselves. Like that's what matters, but we don't always get like that feedback or that reassurance. Or like on the flip side, to tie it a bit more to what you said, like I know that we are both friends and fans of the baby boy Bryce Isaiah, but
Yeah.
like for me it was like largely seeing and hearing him. And then there have been, like, I think of Amon Adwin,
Yeah.
tons of
Yes.
Philly showing up in
Philly
that
shows up. Yeah,
representation.
yeah.
But
Philly's great.
are there any relationships like that that have just been really pivotal for you, not to put you on the spot, but like within this community?
Well, I love Nicole, she's amazing. She helped me figure out how to use my Cricut, which is you can see back there. It's
Oh
like
my gosh.
yeah, you print things out with it and you can, like, make shirts and, like, all of this stuff. So
Yes.
yeah, well, it's, the relationships with people on the network, like, is like, this was, like, another thing that was, like, because the whole thing you say about, like, reach out to us because we don't know who's
Yeah.
listening, and it's like, I've been lucky enough to be on, like, a few podcasts that have, like, reached, like, a pretty, like, enough of an audience where I was, like, getting feedback, like, when I've covered, like, really big shows for post-show recaps. But then, like, sometimes you're on a podcast and you're doing a lot of work and it's week after week and you're just like, "Is
Mhm.
anybody listening to me?" Like, does
Mhm.
anybody or, like, do people think, like, "Is this like, am I doing this for me? Am I doing this for somebody
Yes.
else? Like, who is getting this?" And you and Grace have, like, done such important work and, like, you've brought such great stuff to the network. But, like, one of the things that's a weird part of my psychology is, like, I'm the type of person who goes to a concert and I feel, like, personally responsible for clapping loud enough that the artist feels like they did a good job. Like,
Yeah.
I, like, really feel
Yeah.
I want, like, I'll be, like, in a huge stadium with, like, so many people, and I'm like, "If I don't do a good enough job, then they're gonna leave, and they're gonna be sad." And, like, it's up to me to make them feel good. And, like, eventually, like, I thought it was, like, important to start, like, reaching out to some of these people who meant a lot
Mm.
to me and, like, let
Yeah.
them know, like, how much the things that they said have meant to me. Like, and I know, like, I've reached out to you a few times after, like,
Yeah.
really meaningful podcasts, and, like, before people, like, really, like, knew who I was, like, I would do some of that, and, like, it was great, like, that, like, to feel like, like, there've been times that I've, like, reached out to, like, podcasters that I, like, really admired that were just, like, celebrities to me, and then they've become friends because, like,
Mhm.
people, like, I don't know, like, it's, like, not everybody has, like, the time to respond to everything, but I do feel like the nice things that you have to say to people mean so much because the negative stuff stands out just so much more that you really
Yeah.
do need to hear the positive as an answer to it. But, like, I mean, Josh Wigler is amazing, and he's, like, given me really, really great opportunities, like, and I appreciate him so much because, like,
Mhm.
I became more involved in podcasting, like, during the pandemic, but it was really,
Mhm.
like, after. It was, like, I don't know, like, I had a really tough time, like, dealing with depression. Like, I went through, like, a tough time that hit like after the pandemic, and I was
Mhm.
like really wanted a project that would excite me and energize me. And I reached out to Josh, and he cared, and he had so much faith in me, and he like found great things for me to do, and I got to cover Severance, and I just feel like he's been like
Yeah.
really supportive of, like always like looking out like, "Oh, this is something else you can do." And the stuff that I've gotten to do for post-show recaps, like I'm covering the strikes, like the entertainment strikes, and of course,
Yeah.
like the writers have an agreement now, which is fantastic, but it's like I'm like I am really passionate about organized labor and about understanding, what contributes to the art that we appreciate, and like what are the social issues involved in that. And it's felt like it's been meaningful work, and I've gotten to talk to like amazing guild members and people who are actively involved in organizing and like platform labor activists. So like that's been really, really a great opportunity. And so I would consider like Josh like a super great friend. But it's like there's such a great community of people. Like
Mhm.
there's so many great people. Like I almost like hesitate to start naming people because I'll forget. But like
Yeah.
you mentioned Grace, and Grace is amazing. Like that's been
Mhm.
I just feel super, super lucky to have gotten to be part of this community. And I do like feel like I'm so glad that I used to like think about this like it's like RHAP is an example of like how if you if you can just I do feel like there's so many spaces for people to participate and find their people in RHAP, and that's
Mhm.
like what I love about it.
Yeah, I mean, and I love that too. I love like being able to show up, and it's it's funny because I just have felt compelled at times. I might as well mention it here. Like I've told Rob at different times, just in different meetings and conversations, unsolicited, of course, but I'm just like, I'm really happy with like getting to cover the things I cover and talk about the things I do when I do, and also to like have the breaks from it when I do, which
Mhm.
like normally when it's a break from podcasting, or when not even a break from podcasting, but when it's like, oh, I'm not covering wrestling week to week, I'm not doing Pod Friends week to week. It's normally like a surge in like
Yeah.
actual work, which also involves a lot of interviewing and like multimedia stuff. But I think it's cool that like I almost think of it like pro wrestling in some ways. I don't know if this is the best analogy. Well, no, yeah. Oh my god, let me
It
commit to
is
this. I
it's
do
the
think it's a
best
great it
analogy.
is probably the best
Move
analogy that
over
any of
Tab's analogy. Here comes pro
yeah,
wrestling analogy.
because in the way like there's so many, you have different characters, different gimmicks, people have different things going on, each person has their own personality, but also sometimes a wrestler debuts, especially early in their career. Amanda, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I'm going to keep going. Sometimes a wrestler debuts early in their career and they just like are finding their character, finding their voice,
Mhm.
figuring out what to say on the mic, figuring out what resonates with the audience and with themselves. But then also, you have some people like Mari and I talk about
Mhm.
wrestling now, and there's this group like the Judgment Day, which is on, like, they're all over everything all over the show, but that doesn't make them more, important than like
Mhm.
the folks that are, in certain spots too.
Uh-huh,
And I
uh-huh.
think that I just love that our community has an appreciation for everybody within it, like from Taryn, who I like love I don't know how he does it. I admire him so much, and I'm always like, Taryn, like, I don't know how you do all that you're doing and find the time and the space,
Mhm.
but like, all the way like to people who we get to hear from like here and there, but
Yeah.
still it's really awesome. And I love that there's room for everybody, because like we've sort of talked about, like we all also have our live, or yeah,
Yeah.
we all also have our lives outside of this, and it's cool that you know you could kind of come in at different levels or different like just amounts of time and
Yeah.
energy that you put into things. And yeah, like you have your super fans, you have your super users of anything, and you have
Yeah.
your people who are just like, I'm just happy to freaking be here. And I don't know, it's cool to like talk about this and to be here. Yeah, like go
Yeah.
wrestling
Go right and
analogies.
thank you, and I now know so much about wrestling because I am a two-time guest on the Wrestling Wrap Up.
You need to come on again as we start to record. It's always so fun to me just to hear like the puzzlement. Like
It's so
and
fun.
I love also that I think in this community, like I think of this recap with Shannon,
Mhm.
and I absolutely adore Shannon like so much.
Yes.
I love Shannon so much, beyond even podcasting, and I just love that we like are now venturing into the world where we're like, no, we have the experts on this stuff, but then we also
Yes.
have the people who are willing to like ask questions and represent like the common
Represent the
newcomer
dummies.
beginner, but no, it's not the dummies. Like represent the normal people. I say
No, I love coming on the Wrestling
like the
Wrap Up
straight man,
because
quote
I
unquote.
love it because I feel like so much pressure to research and know things and have expertise and like to talk about like if I'm talking about like a show, I feel like I have to know everything about the show. Like if I'm talking about like the strikes, I do lots of like I just that's like the way that I'm wired. And then I come on the Wrestling Wrap Up and I'm just like, I'm just gonna make the dumbest, like uninformed observation. And then
Oh,
that's gonna be
I
like,
love it.
that's so interesting that you would ask. I
Well,
love
no,
it.
and it's genuine.
I
It's
know it's
genuine because
great.
it's like thinking outside of the box is so important, and our brains are I think wired to find comfort in patterns. You know
Yes.
more about this than I
Mhm.
do.
Yes.
Look at me dropping my limited,
I
and now I'm going to
amazing.
back away from the brain comments because I don't know much. But I will say, like, we're so wired to like be comfortable in patterns and also be comfortable in establishing our expertise and being confident. And I
Mhm.
find as an interviewer, but also just as a podcaster, like sometimes it's more comfortable to be the person who knows the thing and has the expertise than like admits not knowing the thing and has the questions. And so
Yeah.
I think it's cool. But actually, like since we're talking about wrestling, maybe to
Yeah.
tie in some other parts of
Ooh.
you, Amanda. I
Yes.
don't know if we've ever talked about this, but I'm curious from your perspective what your pro wrestling character would be because I don't know if you have a name in mind. I feel like you've thought
Uh-huh.
about this before, but I will say I'm imagining you've thought about this before in your wrestling things. But I'm thinking of like I know that you are big on cooking. There's you
Oh,
mentioned your kids. There's the
yes.
baking. I saw like
Yes.
a big, beautiful Italian food spread on your Instagram
Yeah.
story, and it actually made me very angry that you didn't invite me to Philly
Honestly,
to
no,
come up for
come to my house and
dinner.
I would love to cook for you, Matt. I would love
Oh my
to.
god,
I
no, I wasn't
would.
fishing for I feel
No,
like
but
you
I would,
I know
genuinely.
you would. That's the
Yeah,
problem. I don't want to pressure you to.
no, I would
By the
love
way,
to. I
yeah,
don't wanna
no.
pressure you to come over, but if you do come
Oh no,
over,
I will.
I will make you a huge I'll make you anything you want, but I'll make you a big Italian meal. I'm good at
Is
that.
that
I'm
your
good at
wrestling character? Could we
Oh, I
find a
could
wrestling
be
hand
like,
that
Striganona, the one who makes, like, the pasta bowl that the pasta that overflows and, like, it's a never-ending pasta. That's what I wanna be. Wait, let me look up. I think it's Striganona.
Striganona is
Yeah.
that's your wrestling name?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I'm
Strigan
Striganona.
I love
No,
that you
it's
just pulled it out.
yeah, I pulled that out. It's a children's book. Google it. That's what I
Oh,
am. I'm like this Italian
Striganona.
Stregonona. I'm an Italian grandma who makes like the never-ending pasta.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Making her way to the ring, hailing from Central Jersey by way of Philadelphia,
Oh.
Pennsylvania. Please welcome the endless chef and the person who will beat you down with
Wooden
beat you
spoon.
into submission with a wooden spoon and make you eat her pasta, even though it is delicious. The one, the only, Dr. Amanda Rabinowitz, aka Stregonona.
Oh, I love that. You really bailed me out with the food connection because I would not have been able to think of anything. I would hate to be a wrestler. I would hate it.
I
I
would
don't
for
I don't
brain
like
related
physical
reasons,
harm.
but
I
yeah,
don't
that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
Amanda, thank you so much for this conversation. I have to ask my last not my last question. I don't even ever know what my last question is, but one
Mhm.
of them, which is a question I ask everybody, which is if your life were a book or a documentary,
Ooh.
what would the title be and why? I hope you I always just have to stretch it out. I
You
feel like you
stretched it
probably
out.
have an answer, though. You probably have an
Well,
answer.
I was prepared because I'm a Pod Friends listener, so I
I
knew this
know.
question
I
was coming.
appreciate it.
And I've been like nervous about this because like I don't think I would write like I wouldn't write a book about myself. Like I wouldn't want to write a book about myself. So I
Wait,
feel like it's hard. Or if there
you don't
was a
have
book,
to write it. Well, you don't have to
I
write
don't
it.
I
It just
wouldn't want
features you.
anybody, like I wouldn't want anybody to write a book about me.
Wow. Well, I guess I have to throw out
No, no, but I
100
came up with
pages
an
of work.
answer. I came up with an answer. Well, it's hard
Okay.
to think about yourself as the subject of a book, just like it's hard
That's
to think
true.
about yourself as a subject of a Pod Friends interview. And there's, of course, like when you get the invitation from Matt, it's extremely flattering, but then you're immediately like, I don't deserve a pod. Like, who cares about me? Like, who cares about my story? Like, I'm not one of these like
Yeah,
figures of significance. And like, so it's very
I
in like,
relate. I'm
yeah,
like,
it's
that's why I'm interviewing you and not interviewing
well,
myself.
now
So
I
we're in
have
the
to
same
start
boat.
an interview podcast to invite you and interview you so that you can be the subject of the podcast.
I mean,
Actually, that is what I
let's
thought I was gonna
strike.
do. Some not today, but somebody commented on something.
Uh-oh.
When is somebody going to interview Matt Scott on Podfreds? I forget what this is. And then I replied, I'll do it. And then you said, I think you said something, and I was like, okay,
Oh,
I can interview Matt.
yeah. It was funny because I think someone commented that, and then like 3 people responded.
Yeah,
You and I think Beth Dixon, and also Mari has mentioned interviewing me. And look, I'm just saying. Maybe
there's a
Latanya
line.
also
There's a
mentioned
line around
Latanya
the
Starks.
block. Yeah.
I'm just saying, look, there's not even a line. Look, it'll happen one day. One day, maybe it'll happen or not. Who knows? But I have people in mind.
You
You're
okay.
on
All
the
right. All right. All right.
you're on the short
I
list.
won't
You're
be
on the short
offended.
list.
I won't be offended, but you are definitely worthy
I'll
of an
interview
interview.
myself.
It should happen. That would be
I'll just
hilarious.
record.
That would be
Yeah,
really funny.
side by side. Look, we'll make it happen.
Mhm. But back
Your
to
book
your
title.
question about the book.
I stay on topic. Yes.
Because it's hard to imagine that one is worthy of being the topic of a book, but I thought about this because I know that this is a question you asked and I didn't want to like sound dumb and not have an answer. So,
You can
I
never
was
sound dumb.
I was thinking about like what are some of like the things that I've learned in terms of like, this whole thing about like jumping into the community and finding your space and like
Mhm.
feeling valid in a place and like balancing that with like also just feeling, I mean, we didn't talk a lot about like, obviously like, I have this career, I have this family, it's like very demand.
Mhm.
Like I feel like I'm like always busy, always doing these other things and like there's so many excuses for like not taking on like, not indulging in like the fun side of you or doing the, that's what I see like the podcast. I whatever. I was
Yeah,
pulling lots of threads together and I was
I
also
love it.
making a big Italian meal. This, as you noticed,
Mhm.
I posted on
Sorry,
Instagram
I'm licking my lips now.
and I saw it in the recipe I was following. Meanwhile, make the meatballs, which is like very alliterative. Meanwhile, make the meatballs. It all starts with M. I thought it was a
Yeah.
really lovely phrase. And it's like this idea that when you're like cooking, you take the time that like the pasta is boiling to do something else, you take the time that like something is in the oven to chop something else. And it's like, that's what I feel like my life is. It's like, meanwhile, make
Wow.
the meatballs. Like between this and this, do something else. And it's like, it's such a lovely phrase. Like, and then you have meatballs. Like, if you make the meatballs and then you cook them and then you have meatballs, and it's like wonderful. So, the title of the book about Amanda, about Stregonona, my wrestling name, is Meanwhile, Make the Meatballs.
Wow, that's so good. By the way, I'm just gonna drop in a side note fact about you that I know, which is that it all fits. You would beat me in a meatball eating contest, and I'm just gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep
Oh,
going.
oh
Yeah.
no. Did I share that on a
No, you
thing?
did. You did share. Yes, you did mention. I will quote. I will beat you in an eating contest, is what
Yes,
you said.
I
So
would.
it's true. I'm
It
not
is true.
I younger me would have beat me. I don't understand it, but younger me would have beat me in an eating contest now. I don't understand how appetites I mean, like as a parent, like
Yes.
I was a
You're
dumpster for
you were
food
growing
back
you were a
in
growing boy. You needed those calories, yeah.
yeah, I know. I'm not a growing boy anymore. I'm just an aging, slowly aging man
Mhm.
at this point. But
Yes.
no, I mean, I actually want to ask like one more thing as a follow up to that because you did mention being a parent, and I often feel like I
Mhm.
hear from people who are they're always just like there are a lot of parents in the RHAP
Mhm.
community who appreciate some of the conversations about parenthood and I don't know if it's like parenthood and how that balances with just being in the community, but
Mhm.
I don't actually have a question. I just kind of want to give you the space to like I don't know, just talk about what that's like in this community. You have mentioned
Yeah.
like just that to a little bit, but I just want to
Yeah.
give you the space for a non-question.
A non-question. I love being a parent. I do feel like it's, like, one of the ways that, like, I've truly become myself, and that's not true of everybody, but I think for me, it was, like, such a thing, like, clicked in parenthood where I was just like, "Oh, this really, like, feels like a part of your identity that you've been waiting to find."
Uh-huh.
So I love it. I love my kids so much. It's like it's so much to balance, like, it really is. It's like it is, like, the hardest thing that I've had to do, like, in terms of, like, mentally, physically, logistically, like,
Mm,
it's just, like, it's a lot, but it's, like, so much more rewarding than it is hard, and, like, it just always changes, so even the stuff that's, like, super hard it'll be a different thing next year, so it's,
yeah.
like, it just there's something, like, comforting about that, but,
Mm,
it's been really, like, sometimes, like, with scheduling the podcasting, you know, it's another thing that, like, when I have work and, like, the kids have, soccer practices to get to or, like, it feels like another extra thing, but actually having this community and being involved has been really nice to have an outlet that is compatible with parenting because it's like I mostly do it, like, up in this guest room,
yeah.
while, like, so it's like it does still fit in, like, it's not like, relative to other things, and it is important to have an outlet, and my kids, like, know that I podcast, and they think it's really cool, like, they don't totally understand what it is, but, like, when Grace and Ariel covered, the Mario movie, the Super Mario
Oh.
movie, we all listened to it together, and, like, my
Aw.
older son was, like, so into it, and he was, like he kept on, like, commenting on things, and he's like, "And on that podcast, they said that," like, he was, like, very serious about it, so it's like and they both watch Survivor now, so they can share that, and, like, so I think it's cool. I think it's very
Yeah.
compatible, and yeah, I love that this is like, multi-generational community where there's people at different phases of life, and, like, some people have families, and some people are, might, like, have different like, I've found this community and that aspect of it, like, really helpful for me. Like, I remember when Rob and Nicole had kids, which was, like, about a year
Yeah.
before I did. It's like they were really, like, role models for me, like, like, I
Mm,
remember when Rob lost his father, that was a couple of years
yeah.
before I lost my father, and it was like, I don't know, it's been really, like, seeing those examples and knowing that this is a place where it's like, I can talk to people about this and they're not, like, my coworkers or my like, it's like there's,
Mhm.
like, a kind of, like there's, like, having this compartmentalized community where you can, like, vet things that might be stresses, like, outside of other parts of your life is also really helpful. So, I don't know, that's what I have to say. My kids are so great. I don't share them on social media because I, like, wanna
Yeah.
save all of that for them to decide to do when they
Mhm.
are much older. But just know that they're like being really, really adorable all the time. And if you
Yeah.
become friends with me, I can like send you individual pictures and videos of them. They're great.
Oh, look at that. But no, I think, you're so phenomenal and I just appreciate everything you shared. And one, you are a parent, but what's apparent is just like the incredible, all the things that you bring to this community. And I'm just so thankful. I think I'll get there in a minute or so, like giving you the space to share any closing words for folks. But I just want to and I don't really do this on Pod Friends because I don't like to be like to show my bias. That's not the right word for it, but like I don't like
I
to just
thought
be
that
like,
this
oh my god,
was supposed to be fair and balanced news
yeah.
on Podfriend.
But no, I just want to say how much I adore you. Like, I feel like it's like the events that we have. Oh my God, I'm not trying to make you cry, but like, it's like the events and things like going to them and just being able to like be in the corner and hang out and
Yes,
chill as when everything can be super overwhelming. It's Survivor Philly and
yeah,
my Survivor Philly 2 experience. And like,
yes,
I will always remember so much from that. Not only the day of filming it and being able to spend it with you, and not only like oh my gosh, the survive, like I will always remember the Survivor Philly finale party where like you and a couple of others were like Brian and Brian
yeah,
LaGreca, Dan Sinensky were staying there just being like so supportive of me. Like I mentioned our bar times, our
yes,
Survivor Philly 3 production
yes.
experience, which like we were texting about, and I was like, that felt like that wasn't the first time that we worked on anything
Mhm.
at all, and I wouldn't have thought of that. But just like I'm just so thankful to know you and be so connected with you, and like the more I feel like I not even learn, but just like have highlighted like through this conversation where it's like just our backgrounds and the overlap there, and like losing our dads, which we obviously relate with that with Rob and others
Mhm.
on Allie, and I think of others who I've
Mhm.
bonded and talked with about that. I'm just like thankful and I'm excited that you could be in this community, and I'm glad that we could do this Pod Friends interview and people could like not only learn from you about brain stuff
Yeah,
trademark,
trademark
but
brain stuff.
also that they could like get to know you more. So this is a favorite of mine, but I want to give you the space, Amanda, as we wrap up. Before, of course, I have the part where like we pause and then I'm like, tell people why people should listen to Pod Friends, and then put that at the beginning of the episode.
Okay.
Like any closing words for the
Wow.
me, the listeners, Pod Friends, all that.
Well, I have closing words for you, Matt, because
Oh my
you're
god.
such, I'm so grateful that I've gotten to know you through this community and all of the things that you've mentioned. And like, I remember like the first time that I became aware of you as a podcaster was when you did the Black Voices. And I was just like so impressed with like the amazing work that you've done, what you did with that and with the Pride is Spoken. And there was like a time on this network where the conversation was like that, oh, well, the only people who want to talk about these kinds of shows or have these
Mm,
conversations are like a very specific kind of like white man. And
yeah,
like and just to see what the community has become, like, of course that wasn't true. And it's like taken, just I think really brave and thoughtful and talented people to change the space, like, of course, with Rob's support, but, like, having, like, the stuff the what I think
totally.
what you've done on the network is, like, so important, and you're a ray of light, and then, like, I just feel super, super fortunate to have gotten to be friends with you, and, like, we've mentioned so many other great people, but I don't know. This is great, and thank you so much for having me. The main reason I wanted to do this was just, like, to have another opportunity to talk to you.
Wow.
Even if you weren't recording this, I would be like, "Well, that was really fun."
No, I feel like I know you would, because that's who you are. And thanks for being awesome and for being a ray of light. And do you have any like a word or something? I don't know what to say. I don't like to end the episodes. Go for it. Say something to the people. To the people.
To the
Not
pe
about me.
Okay, what should I say to the people? Thank you for listening to my pod friends, and, I hope that you learned about brains, and I hope that you learned about the great children's book, Stregonona, which I definitely recommend, and just, like, make pasta, and you don't have to make meatballs if you're vegetarian, then don't
Mm.
make meatballs, make something else, but pasta is great, and I love it. If you're there's gluten-free pastas. I wish I could make pasta for everybody. I think that's what I wanna close with. I wish I could make pasta for everybody in the RHAP community, because I absolutely would.
Okay, that's one famous last words. You will have the opportunity to make pasta for everyone in the RHAP community. Thank you, Amanda. This is where we're ending it. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning into this episode of Pod Friends featuring Dr. Amanda. And Amanda, I love you. I appreciate you. I'm so grateful for you. And I'm so grateful that more and more people, hopefully, through this conversation can get to know you. But if you want to get to know more folks who are part of this network, part of this community, part of the Pod Friends journey, subscribe to Pod Friends. Check out the back catalog. It doesn't get old. The episodes are pretty evergreen. You can go to robhaswebsite.com/podfriendsfeed to check those out. And I can't encourage you enough to, again, connect on social media at MattScottGW, connect on X in particular at Hey Pod Friends. I've been good at being active there, so I'm trying to keep that up. And of course, leave a voicemail, speakpipe.com/podfriends. Suggest a future guest by going to bit.ly/podfriendsnom. That's bit.ly/podfriendsnom. Like the noms that we talked about throughout this episode. So many food references. I'm really hungry right now. I'm going to go do that. But if you want to support putting food, I didn't plan for this transition. I'm going to go with it. Putting food in people's mouths, supporting the podcasters that you know and love, and supporting the community you know and love. Become an RHAP, Rob is a podcast patron. Be in the community. Learn about upcoming events when Survivor rolls around. robhasawebsite.com/Patreon. Again, robhasawebsite.com/Patreon to support all of the content that we are putting out there. But I'm so thankful to you, Pod Friends. I'm so thankful to the RHAP team for putting this out there. I'm so thankful for Dr. Amanda. I'm so thankful for the upcoming conversations with Owen Knight, with Randy Marin, with others coming up this season. So excited to announce. But until next time, thank you for being a pod friend.